In this city of glass and steel, where every moment's precision is tracked by solace. Mara's eyes were red from staring at screens, her hair a rat-tail mess against the stark walls of her condo. A bureau notification pinged on her wrist implant, jolting Mara upright like a reflexive muscle memory. Now an optomy match waits in the wings. Will it lead to perfection or destroy everything she holds dear? Mara's heart raced as she stared at Elias's profile, each data point confirming he was made for her. But what of Danny, the man who loves her off-script, whose unpredictability thrills and unsettles her? The obelisk pulsed as Mara reached for Elias's digital hand, torn between two worlds. Like and subscribe for more stories like this one. Mara's apartment smelled of stale coffee, which she'd been drinking since midnight while reviewing Salus match data for the bureau. Her eyes were dry and red from staring at screens. Her hair was a rat-tail mess against the stark glass walls of her condo. She'd slept with Danny in that very bed just hours before, but now he snored softly on his side, one leg tangled with hers. The ping from her wrist implants jolted Mara upright. Her heart rate spiked. Not panic exactly, but a reflexive tension, like the first twitch of a muscle memory. She checked her messages. Another bureau notification flagged as low priority but urgent enough to warrant a direct tone override in the dead of night. She dismissed it and returned to the audit logs, trying to focus on the intricate patterns of statistical correlation between compatibility metrics and life outcomes. But her mind kept wandering back to Danny's warm body beside hers, his messy hair, the way he laughed when she finally admitted she loved loud music too. Mara trusted systems more than she trusted herself. Always had, ever since childhood, when her mother's mental illness made every interaction a minefield of uncertainty. So it was natural for Mara to put faith in Solus, to believe that an algorithm could quantify and predict the mysteries of the human heart better than she could. But Danny didn't have an implant. He'd refused the mandatory upgrade when it first became available, saying he wanted to stay unpredictable. Mara had teased him about being old-fashioned, but secretly she admired his defiance, his refusal to be predicted or controlled. Still, in her more honest moments, Mara couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Danny was a statistical anomaly, not just because of his implantless status, but because he registered low on every compatibility metric Solus used. They argued about this sometimes. Danny claimed it didn't matter, that he loved her, off script. But Mara knew better than to take comfort in mere sentimentality. Her phone buzzed again with a text from Priya. "Hey Mara, got your notification yet? Your optimal match is finally ready. Come by the office and let's celebrate." Mara hesitated for a moment. Did she really want to know what Solus had decreed about her future? She could feel the weight of the bureau notification still humming in her implant, but for now she pushed it aside. There was no hurry. They had all night. She reached out to trace the curve of his ear, watching the way the streetlights outside cast shadows on his face. He stirred slightly at her touch and opened his eyes, blinking sleepily up at her. "Hey," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Hey yourself." Mara smiled, leaning in to brush a kiss across his lips. "You were out cold. I didn't want to wake you." Danny snorted. "I can sleep through anything, even Solus's siren song." Mara frowned at that, even though she knew what he meant. There was always something about the bureau and its perfect predictions that seemed to hum in her veins like a background melody. "I guess." She shrugged it off. "Anyway, we've got a few more hours before I have to get up for work." Danny nodded, rolling onto his side to face her. His hand came to rest on her stomach, warm through the thin fabric of her shirt. Mara felt a flutter in response, even though she knew it was just her body reacting to his touch. "Hey," he said again, his voice softer now. "What's going on with you? You seem off." Mara hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She didn't want to lie to him. Not anymore. But she wasn't sure if Danny could handle the truth of her conflicted feelings. "It's nothing," she said finally, forcing a smile. "Just some stuff at work. I'll tell you about it later, okay? Danny raised an eyebrow but nodded, seeming to accept her dismissal. Mara let out a sigh of relief, wondering how long this charade could last. She reached over to turn off the lamp beside the bed, plunging the room into darkness. But instead of drifting back to sleep like she expected, she lay there awake, her mind racing with thoughts of Solace and its predictions. Was Danny right? Was she really just trying to fit herself into some perfect mold that the algorithm had decreed for her? Mara didn't have an answer. All she knew was that somewhere in the middle of the night, when it felt like no one was watching, she wanted to believe in something more than data points and probability curves. She wanted to believe in love. Mara woke to the sound of Danny's voice, low and urgent, from the kitchen. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, checked the time, and saw a message waiting from Solace. Optimal match generated. Her heart skipped a beat as she typed out a reply, asking what it meant, but there was no response. In the shower, she tried to clear her mind of the notification, focusing instead on the warm water cascading over her skin. By the time she stepped out and wrapped herself in a towel, Danny had already poured 2 cups of coffee and set them on the kitchen table. He sat down across from her, his eyes still dark with sleep, but crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "You're up early," Mara said, rubbing her wet hair with the towel. "I couldn't sleep," Danny admitted, stirring creamer into his cup. "Had too much on my mind." He looked at her, really looked, and Mara felt a flutter in her chest. Was it possible he sensed something was off? "What's going on?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay?" Yeah, Danny said, waving one hand dismissively. "Just some stuff at work. Nothing you need to worry about." Mara nodded, unsure if she should press the issue or let it drop for now. She took a sip of her own coffee, the bitterness a welcome distraction from the swirling thoughts in her head. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of breakfast and getting ready for work. Mara made sure to leave early enough to beat any rush hour traffic, her mind already on the stack of reports waiting for her at the bureau. She couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen, and she had no idea what. As she stepped off the elevator onto the office floor, Priya appeared out of nowhere, a huge smile plastered across her face. "Mara, have you checked your inbox?" she asked, practically bouncing on the balls of her feet. "You won't believe it." Mara frowned, her heart sinking as she imagined some new audit finding or compliance issue. But when she followed Priya to her workstation and logged in, what greeted her was anything but. There, sitting in plain sight, amidst the usual stream of emails from clients and colleagues, was a notification from Solace. "Optimal match generated. View your assignment now." Mara's hands trembled as she clicked on the link. The obelisk that had appeared before her on countless audits now filled the screen, its glowing blue light casting an eerie pallor over her face. A moment later, Elias Cade materialized on the interface, 99.7th percentile compatibility, projected life satisfaction scores a full standard deviation higher than anything Mara could currently imagine. "Congratulations," Solace's gentle voice whispered in her earpiece. "Your optimal match has been generated." Mara felt like she'd been punched in the chest. This was it. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, or fearing all these years. The system had finally decided which man was perfect for her. She turned away from Priya's expectant gaze, trying to process what she was seeing. Elias Cade, a man who didn't exist 2 days ago, was now the algorithmically certified embodiment of Mara's destiny. Her heart thudded against her ribcage as she read through his profile, learning about his job, his family, and the ways in which he'd been molded to complement her every need and desire. The obelisk seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy, its light bathing Mara in a strange, seductive glow. She felt herself leaning into it, drawn by the promise of perfection embodied in Elias's digital form. And then, as if sensing her weakness, Soleil spoke again. "Your optimal match is confirmed. Would you like to view your compatibility certificate now?" The question hung in the air, its implications both exhilarating and terrifying. Mara knew what she should do: share it with Priya, discuss it over lunch or after work, strategize how to present it to Danny. But as she stared at Elias's image, Something inside her snapped. She didn't want to think about it. She just wanted to know the answer. "Yes," she whispered into the silence of the office. "Yes, I'll take a look." Mara's eyes flicked back to her obelisk as the compatibility certificate materialized, its glowing text scrolling through Elias's data points in a hypnotic rhythm. She read it again, trying to parse out what she was seeing. His IQ slightly higher than hers, their childhood interests overlapping by 87%, an almost exact match on emotional regulation and social anxiety. Even their favorite books were eerily similar, as if Elias had been reading her subconscious all along. The obelisk fell silent, but Mara couldn't tear herself away from the screen. She felt like she was drowning in the sea of numbers and statistics, each one confirming what she'd always secretly known, that Elias Cade was made for her, the perfect complement to her own life's trajectory. But then a harsh voice cut through her reverie, echoing off the sterile walls of her condo's bedroom. "Mara, what are you doing?" Danny stood in the doorway, his sweatpants riding low on his hips as he rubbed sleep from his eyes. He looked disheveled and adorable, the morning light highlighting the dark stubble along his jawline. "Just working on some bureau reports," she stammered, trying to keep her voice steady as she reached for her tablet and shoved it under a pile of dirty laundry. But Danny wasn't fooled. "What were you looking at?" he asked, his tone softer now but no less probing. Mara swallowed hard, trying to come up with an excuse that wouldn't raise more questions than she could answer. But before she could speak, Danny's hands came down on her shoulders, turning her to face him. "What is it, Mara? You're acting weird." His warm fingers traced the line of her jaw as he searched her face for answers. Mara felt herself lean into his touch, craving the comfort and familiarity of his presence in a way that made her stomach twist with guilt. She knew she shouldn't be comparing him to Elias, but she couldn't help it. Every moment with Danny now seemed tinged with imperfection compared to the flawless picture painted by her optimal match. "I'm fine," Mara lied, trying to muster up a reassuring smile. But it faltered as Danny's gaze held hers, his eyes darkening with concern and a hint of hurt. She knew she had to give him something, anything to placate him and avoid an argument. "It's just stress from work," she said finally, opting for the partial truth. "I'll tell you about it over breakfast." Danny nodded slowly, but Mara could see the unspoken questions lingering in his eyes. He believed her this time, but he wouldn't be so easily convinced next time, or maybe ever again if she wasn't honest with him. The realization sent a chill down her spine as she led Danny to the kitchen, knowing that she couldn't keep up this charade for much longer. The morning light spilled through the windows as Mara cracked eggs into the skillet, the sizzling sound of oil and protein filling the small space between them. She glanced over at Danny, who was scrolling through his phone with a bemused expression on his face. He was probably reading some hilarious meme or news article that would make her laugh if she bothered to look. But Mara couldn't muster up much enthusiasm for their usual morning routine now that Elias's digital presence lingered in the back of her mind like an uninvited guest. She felt torn between two worlds, the one she knew with Danny, where love was messy and imperfect but real, and the other she'd glimpsed in Elias's profile, a world where compatibility was measured by algorithms and statistical outcomes. As she slid the scrambled eggs onto a plate for Danny, Mara made herself a silent bow. She would deal with this later, after work, maybe over a glass of wine or two. For now, she needed to focus on the man standing in front of her, on the life they built together despite the odds against them. Because when it came down to it, love wasn't about being optimal. It was about choosing each other, flaws and all. Thanks," Danny murmured as he dug into his breakfast, the tangy scent of melted cheese wafting up to mingle with the aroma of brewing coffee on the counter. Mara watched him eat, her mind still racing with thoughts of Elias and Solace and the compatibility certificate burning a hole in her pocket. But for now, she would put them all aside and focus on this moment, on Danny's messy hair and crooked smile as he savored the taste of their shared meal. She reached out to brush a strand of hair from his forehead, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips. "Morning," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. Danny looked up at her then, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "Morning," he echoed, his hand finding hers and intertwining their fingers together in a silent understanding that they would face whatever came next, imperfectly but always together. The weeks that followed were a blur of work, dates with Elias and late-night conversations with Danny about their future. Mara felt like she was walking through a dream, one foot in her old life and the other already leaving its mark on the new. She couldn't deny how right Elias felt, how seamlessly he fit into every conversation, how effortlessly they laughed together. But more than that, she couldn't ignore the sensation of being seen, like he had somehow unlocked a part of herself she'd kept hidden even from Danny. At work, Priya's excitement about Mara's optimal match assignment grew with each passing day. She regaled their colleagues with stories of Elias's achievements and predicted lifetime satisfaction scores that made everyone green with envy. "You're so lucky," Priya would say, her voice tinged with a hint of envy as she pored over the certificate details on Mara's tablet. Mara would nod politely, her mind elsewhere, with Danny in his cramped apartment surrounded by vinyl records and half-eaten takeout containers, arguing about the merits of leaky roofs versus pristine condos, the smell of rain-slicked pavement mingling with the scent of his hoodie. But with each passing day, Elias's presence in Mara's life became more pronounced. The bureau arranged for them to coincidentally run into one another at a coffee shop downtown, then at an art gallery opening uptown. Each encounter left her feeling breathless and uncertain, like she was standing on the edge of a precipice with no safety net. The day of their fourth scheduled meeting arrived, bringing with it a light drizzle that glistened on the glass and steel towers lining Meridian streets. Mara, dressed in black leggings and a white blouse, her long dark hair pulled back into a sleek bun. She felt like a doll, one meticulously crafted by Elias's optimal match algorithm to fit seamlessly into his life. The obelisk pulsed gently as she approached the designated meetup spot, a small park tucked between two condo complexes near the waterfront. Elias was already there, seated on a bench under the awning of a vacant flower stand. He rose when he saw her, offering a warm smile that seemed to reach out and envelop her. "Mara," he said softly, his voice like honey drizzled over fine china, "I'm so glad you could make it." She felt a flutter in her chest as she took the seat beside him. Elias reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that was both comforting and unsettling. "I've been looking forward to this," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "There's something I want to show you." He pulled out a small tablet. Mara Voss sat alone in her glass condo, gazing out at the rain-slicked cityscape below. The obelisk on her coffee table hummed softly to itself as it processed the last of the bureau's match data she'd audited earlier that day. She should have been long asleep by now, but exhaustion had become a distant memory since her optimal match notification from Solus. She tried to dismiss it at first, just another meaningless statistic in a sea of numbers, but the truth lingered like an uninvited guest, refusing to leave. Elias Cade was Mara's 99.7th percentile compatibility match, projected life satisfaction scores dwarfing her current trajectory by every measurable outcome. The thought sent a shiver down her spine each time she considered it. The notification itself had been innocuous enough, just a quick flash of light on the obelisk as Solus announced Elias's name and profile summary. But what lay beneath those sterile data points was something far more profound, something that Mara couldn't quite put into words even for herself. Elias wasn't simply an ideal partner. He represented a future she'd never dared to imagine. A life where every decision had already been optimized by the greatest minds in the field of predictive analytics. Mara sighed and rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the lingering unease that had settled like a fog around her thoughts. But as much as she yearned for that perfect fit, Mara couldn't quite reconcile her head and heart. Solace's promise of an optimized life versus the unpredictable beauty of human connection. The hum of the obelisk seemed to grow louder then, its gentle pulse throbbing like a heartbeat in time with Mara's own racing pulse. She felt herself leaning towards Elias, drawn by some unseen force that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I think I'm starting to understand," she whispered. Her eyes locked on his as they sat there together in the rain-soaked park. "The way everything fits, it's like a puzzle." Elias nodded slowly, his gaze never wavering from hers. "Yes," he said softly. "It's all about finding the perfect fit." From his jacket pocket and handed it over with a flourish. Mara took it hesitantly, her heart pounding as she brought up the app Elias had installed, one that allowed him to monitor her location in real time. "It's nothing invasive," he assured her. "I just wanted to make sure I could find you easily." Mara's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the live map displaying her exact whereabouts. It was intimate, knowing that someone else had access to such personal information. But more than that, it felt right. "It's beautiful," she murmured, tracing a finger along the digital coastline before zooming out to include their meeting spot. "I love how it shows everything in relation to one another." Elias smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he reached for her hand again. Help, but feel a twinge of guilt towards Danny. His messy, unpredictable love was the only thing she'd ever truly known. The obelisk beeped again, this time with an incoming bureau message Mara had dismissed earlier in her audit session. The notification icon flashed on her wrist implant as well. A mandatory response was required within the hour. She hesitated for a moment before touching the screen to accept the call, knowing full well what awaited her. "Ms. Voss," began the voice of Solace over the audio feed, "we have an urgent matter regarding your optimal match with Elias Cade. Please report to our offices immediately for further instructions." Mara felt her heart sink as she rose from the couch and made her way towards the door, wondering what other revelations lay in store for her. The rain pattered against the windows as she stepped out into it, the sound echoing the turmoil churning inside her. The bureau headquarters was located just a few blocks from Mara's condo, in one of the older glass towers still standing since the early days of Meridian. She entered the sleek lobby and presented herself to the receptionist, who led her straight through security without hesitation, another perk of working directly for Solus. The journey up to the executive offices was quiet and uneventful, save for Mara's own racing thoughts as she tried to prepare herself for whatever lay ahead. The door to Director Thorne's office opened with a soft click, revealing a scene that took Mara aback entirely. Priya Nair, her colleague from the audit department, sat across the desk from the director, an earnest expression on her face as she listened intently to his words. As soon as their eyes met, Priya's gaze flicked over to Mara and broke into a warm smile. "Ah, there you are," she exclaimed, rising from her seat and rushing towards Mara with open arms. "I've been worried sick about you all day. Director Thorne just informed me that your optimal match notification was flagged for urgent review." Mara hesitated for a moment before embracing Priya back, feeling an overwhelming surge of relief at seeing her friend. "It's okay," she said softly. "Solus is just being thorough, I'm sure." Priya nodded, leading Mara over to the side of the office where Elias was waiting, his features set in an expression of perfect calm. "Mara Voss, meet your optimal match," Director Thorne announced, gesturing towards them both. "Elias Cade has undergone a comprehensive review by our team, and we are confident that he is the perfect partner for you, statistically speaking, at least." Mara's eyes dotted back and forth between Priya and Elias as the words sank in, feeling like she was trapped in some kind of bizarre dream. Priya stepped forward again, her voice filled with excitement. "Mara, this is incredible. Your compatibility score is off the charts. You two are practically destined for each other." Mara swallowed hard, trying to find the right words to respond as Elias reached out and took her hand. His touch was gentle, reassuring. "I'm thrilled," he said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. Mara's heart skipped a beat at that admission, feeling like she'd stumbled into some kind of parallel universe where the rules no longer applied. She glanced back towards Priya, who was watching them with a knowing smile. "Go ahead and start your certification process," Priya urged. "Trust me, Once you two are officially matched, everything will fall into place. Mara bit her lip, torn between the comfort of Priya's reassurance and the nagging uncertainty that still lingered in the back of her mind. As she looked at Elias again, this man who had been designed to love her above all else, she couldn't help but wonder if he truly understood her, or if he was simply fulfilling some predetermined script. The decision loomed before her like a dark cloud on the horizon, threatening to engulf everything she held dear. And yet, as Mara gazed into Elias's eyes, she felt an inexplicable pull towards him, a sense of belonging that couldn't be denied, no matter what doubts lingered in her mind. Elias led Mara to his office, where he retrieved her certification documents from the secure drawer. As they waited for the Bureau's approval, he told her about his job as a conflict resolution mediator, explaining that his role was to listen and understand, not impose solutions. Mara found herself captivated by his thoughtful responses and genuine interest in everything she said. By the time Priya called with the news of their certified status, Mara felt more at ease than she had all day. As they left the Bureau together, Elias took her hand once again. This time it was an act of public unity rather than discreet reassurance. The media crew waiting outside caught sight of them and swarmed forward to capture the moment. Mara posed politely for photos, her heart still racing from the surreal whirlwind that had consumed her life in a matter of hours. Elias seemed unperturbed by the commotion, smiling warmly as he answered questions about their relationship. Back at his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, Mara finally felt like she could breathe again. Elias offered her a glass of wine and they sat together on the couch, gazing out at the rain-slicked skyline. He turned to face her, his voice low and sincere. "Mara, I want you to know that this isn't just about a certification or an algorithm. It's about us, our connection, our future together." His words struck a chord deep within her, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being on display like a specimen under a microscope. She took a sip of wine and tried to articulate her unease. "Elias, it's all so fast," she said cautiously. "I feel like we're skipping steps, rushing into things that we haven't even had time to explore." His expression softened with understanding. "But think of us as the pioneers in this new frontier of love and compatibility. We have the privilege of shaping what it means to be an optimal match, to redefine what's possible when two people are meant to be together." Mara studied his face, trying to decipher whether she was hearing sincerity or script. Part of her yearned to believe him. He did seem to understand her in a way that no one else ever had. As the night wore on and the wine flowed, Mara found herself opening up to Elias about Danny, about their imperfect but passionate relationship. She felt a strange sense of liberation sharing these details with someone who was supposed to be her perfect complement. Elias listened attentively, asking insightful questions and offering empathetic comments. Mara began to see him not just as an algorithmic ideal, but as an individual who cared deeply for her, flaws and all. The hours slipped away unnoticed as they delved into each other's pasts, fears, and dreams. By the time the rain subsided outside, Mara felt a profound sense of connection with Elias that she couldn't quite explain or quantify. As he walked her to a car, Elias took both her hands in his once again. His eyes were warm with sincerity as he said, "Thank you for being so honest with me tonight, Mara. I know we've only just begun this journey together, but I feel like I already understand you better than anyone else." Mara's heart skipped a beat at the depth of emotion in his voice. As she drove away from his building and into the night, she couldn't help but wonder if Elias truly understood her, or if it was simply the algorithm working its magic once again. The question lingered in the back of her mind as she pulled up to Danny's apartment, steeling herself for what felt like an inevitable confrontation. She knew he'd sensed something had changed. The question was how much truth would she be willing to reveal? Mara's fingers hovered over her tablet, the obelisk in the corner casting a pale blue glow on her features. It had been 2 days since Elias, since that perfect night where everything felt like it was falling into place. But there was another truth she'd been avoiding. Danny knew nothing about any of it. She thought back to their last argument, The way he'd accused her of choosing between him and a system designed for love. The sting still lingered on her skin. She didn't want to hurt him again. And yet, every moment she spent with Elias only reinforced what Solus had revealed, that she was meant to be with someone else. Mara sighed and tapped the screen awake. Her finger traced the edge of the obelisk's glass base as she considered her next move. She could text Danny, arrange a meeting in person, but something about that felt forced, unnatural. This needed to happen face to face without the buffer of digital communication. She stood up, padding across the room to glance out the window. The city was just beginning to wake, its glass towers reflecting the deepening dawn. Mara's heart clenched as she thought of Danny, how he loved early mornings before the world got in their way. Taking a deep breath, she reached for her phone and dialed his number. It rang twice before he picked up, his voice warm and sleepy on the other end of the line. "Hey, you," he said, his tone softening even further. "Everything okay?" Mara hesitated, unsure how to begin. She'd always been good at compartmentalizing her thoughts, but now, with Elias's presence still fresh in her mind, it was as if all her secrets were clamoring for release. "Danny," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to talk to you." There was a pause, and then he was saying something about coming over right away. Mara felt a rush of relief mixed with trepidation. This conversation wasn't going to be easy, but it was long overdue. By the time Danny arrived, Mara had managed to compose herself. She poured the Meech a cup of coffee and led him into the living room, trying to gauge his mood from the set of his jaw, the way he avoided eye contact. "So," he said finally, setting down his mug on the low glass table between them. "What's going on?" Mara took a deep breath before plunging in. "I met someone else," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "His name is Elias." The silence that followed was almost palpable. Mara could feel Danny's gaze boring into her, as if he was trying to see beneath the surface of her confession. "Who's Elias?" he asked at last, his voice surprisingly even. "He's my optimal match," she explained. Solus assigned us to each other. Danny's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Oh," he said, as if that revelation explained everything and nothing at the same time. He ran a hand through his hair, pushing it back from his forehead. "Okay, so you're saying you want to be with him?" Mara hesitated before answering, feeling like she was walking on thin ice. "I don't know," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Solus is right. Elias and I are very compatible. We've already had dinner together twice now." The words felt foreign as they left her lips, as if they weren't truly hers to say. But as she glanced over at Danny, she saw the way his eyes had narrowed, the tension in his shoulders. "Dinner?" he repeated, disbelief creeping into his tone. "Twice? How long has this been going on?" Mara shrugged again, feeling like a liar even though she hadn't done anything wrong. "A few days," she said finally. Danny's jaw clenched as if he was grinding his teeth together. Mara could practically see the wheels turning in his head, trying to process everything she'd just told him. "So you're saying you've been seeing this Elias guy while we were still dating?" His words felt like a punch to the gut, leaving her breathless and stunned. "No," Mara said quickly, shaking her head. "It wasn't like that. It's not like I wanted it to happen at all. But the damage was done." Danny rose from his seat abruptly, his movements tight with controlled anger. "Save it, Mara," he said coldly, his eyes blazing with hurt and betrayal. She reached out for him, but he stepped away, her hand falling limply back to her side. For a moment they simply stared at each other, the air thick with unspoken words and shattered trust. "You know what?" Danny said finally, his voice low and even. "I think I'm done trying to understand you." With that, he turned on his heel and walked out of the apartment, leaving Mara alone in her living room, reeling from the force of their argument. As she listened to the sound of his footsteps fading down the hallway, Mara couldn't help but wonder if this was truly over, or if she'd simply driven him away without realizing it. But as she looked around at the empty rooms, the silence that had once felt so comforting now felt like a hollow echo of everything they'd shared, and she knew in her heart that their time together was drawing to a close. With a heavy sigh, Mara picked up her phone and dialed Elias's number. "Hi, Elias," Mara said, her voice sounding unnaturally calm against the backdrop of her racing thoughts. "I was thinking, maybe we could get together again soon." There was a pause on the other end, just long enough to make Mara wonder if he'd misunderstood or simply chose not to respond immediately. But then he spoke, his tone unchanged from their previous conversations, warm and reassuring without being overly enthusiastic. "Of course, Mara. I'd like that very much." She nodded even though she knew he couldn't see her. "Good. I'll let you know when I'm free." With that, she hung up the phone and sat there for a few moments, staring blankly at nothing in particular. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the distant hum of the obelisk and the soft patter of rain against the windows. Mara couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just sealed her own fate, locking herself into a path from which there was no turning back. As if to confirm this suspicion, her wrist implant began to buzz insistently in protest at her decision. Sighing heavily, Mara reached up and deactivated it, the silence that followed almost palpable. She knew what she had to do now. She needed to see Elias again, to continue whatever strange, predestined dance they'd been led into by the unforgiving logic of solace. With a sense of resignation settling over her like a shroud, Mara rose from the couch and made her way to the bedroom, where she began rummaging through her closet in search of an outfit suitable for another meeting with her optimal match. As she dressed, her mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead, both for herself and for the relationship she knew was about to blossom into full bloom. Once she was ready, Mara headed out into the rain-soaked streets, her heart pounding a staccato rhythm in her chest as she made her way toward Elias's apartment. The closer she got, the more unreal everything felt, like she was walking through a dream that wasn't quite her own. When she finally arrived at his doorstep and knocked, the sound seemed to reverberate through every cell of her body. The door opened almost immediately, revealing Elias standing there with an expression of warm welcome on his face. "Mara," he said softly, stepping back to allow her entrance. "You look lovely tonight." She smiled slightly, feeling a flicker of embarrassment at the compliment despite herself. "Thank you," she replied, following him into the apartment. As they sat down together on the couch, Mara couldn't help but notice how perfectly their bodies fit side by side, as if they'd been molded for this very moment. The evening unfolded much like their previous meetings, a gentle stream of conversation punctuated by shared laughs and an undeniable sense of ease between them. Yet despite all this, Mara found herself unable to fully relax in Elias's presence, her mind constantly straying back to the man she had left behind. At one point, as they were sipping their drinks and discussing everything from work to movies to childhood memories, Elias leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Mara," he said quietly, "I've been wanting to ask, are you happy with our arrangement so far?" She hesitated for just a moment before answering, the words feeling strangely hollow on her tongue. "Yes," she replied firmly, trying to convince herself as much as him. "Very." Elias nodded thoughtfully, but didn't press the issue further, and Mara breathed a small sigh of relief at his understanding. As the night wore on, they continued their easy banter, each moment filled with an unspoken understanding that this was all part of some grand plan orchestrated by Solace. But as Mara gazed into Elias's eyes once more, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more beneath the surface, something hidden, waiting to be uncovered. And in that moment she knew that her journey toward happiness wasn't quite over yet. It had only just begun. The days blurred together as Mara found herself increasingly torn between her burgeoning relationship with Elias and the memory of Danny. Their encounters with Solace's optimal match were like scheduled doctor's appointments, each time leaving her more conflicted than before. Elias had never pressured her to commit or even discuss a future together. He seemed content to simply enjoy their company whenever chance or design placed them in the same vicinity. One afternoon, as Mara and Elias strolled through the city park on one of their incidental meetings, Mara couldn't help but notice how seamlessly Elias navigated every interaction. He always seemed to know exactly what she needed, whether it was a comforting arm around her shoulders or a clever joke to lighten her mood. But with each passing moment, Mara felt more like an observer in their own lives rather than the active participant. As they walked beneath the towering trees, Elias turned to her and asked, "Have you ever thought about why we seem to fit together so easily? Do you believe it's because of our compatibility or something else entirely?" His question hung in the air, a challenge Mara couldn't ignore. She hesitated before responding, unsure how much of herself she wanted to reveal. "I think," she began slowly, "that there must be some truth to Solus's predictions. I mean, statistically speaking." Elias nodded thoughtfully but said nothing, allowing her to continue. "But I can't help wondering if we're just being manipulated into liking each other, because the numbers say so." Elias considered this for a moment before responding in his usual measured tone. "Perhaps there is some element of manipulation involved, though I believe it stems from understanding rather than coercion." He paused, then added with a hint of warmth, "After all, who wouldn't want to be seen as their best possible self?" His words sent a shiver down Mara's spine. She had always found comfort in Solus's guiding hand, but now she couldn't help but wonder if true love might require something more complex and unpredictable. The thought made her heart ache for the man she had left behind. As they reached the park exit, Elias turned to face her once more. His eyes held a strange intensity that sent goosebumps across Mara's skin. "Remember," he said softly, "there is no right or wrong in this situation." With those enigmatic words, he leaned in and brushed his lips against hers, a gentle, fleeting kiss that left her breathless and questioning everything she thought she knew about love and choice. As Mara watched Elias disappear into the crowd, she felt a sense of unease creeping over her. Their conversations had become increasingly cryptic, as if Elias was speaking to some hidden part of herself he couldn't quite verbalize. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their connection than simple compatibility, a spark that threatened to consume her at any moment. With a deep sigh, Mara made her way back to her apartment, already counting down the hours until she would see Elias again. As she settled into bed, her thoughts drifted inevitably back to Danny, the man who had never fit into Solus's perfectly calibrated world, but whom her heart insisted was right for her nonetheless. Tomorrow would bring another meeting with Elias, and another chance to explore the strange pull they seemed to exert on each other. But as Mara closed her eyes, she couldn't help wondering what it might take to break free from Solus's alluring grip, the very thing that had brought them together in the first place. Mara opened her eyes to find herself back at her obelisk, staring blankly at the notification that had altered everything. The message was still there, but Elias's face was nowhere to be seen, replaced instead by a simple, pulsing icon of approval from Solus. "Your optimal match assignment has been rerun using enhanced data," the AI announced in its usual measured tone. "Based on this new analysis, your highest likelihood for satisfaction and longevity remains with Elias Cade. Please proceed to schedule further meetups as recommended." Mara let out a shaky laugh at the absurdity of it all. The machine didn't care that she'd been secretly seeing Danny. It only cared about outcomes, and by its own twisted logic, those outcomes still favored Elias. She reached for a tablet to cancel the upcoming dates with Elias, but hesitated. What if Solus was right? What if everything would be better with someone who understood her on a deep, algorithmic level? Rebellions Danny had instigated, the way he loved to cook and play vinyl records loud enough for neighbors to complain, the way he never hesitated to speak his mind, even when it meant disagreeing with everything around them. He was the opposite of everything Solus stood for, a reminder that not every moment could be optimized or predicted. And yet, it wasn't a lack of logic that drew her to him. It was the raw, messy, beautiful unpredictability of being alive, something Solus would never truly understand. Mara quickened her pace as she approached Meridian Central Station, the beating heart of the city where all paths seemed to converge. She knew Danny well enough by now to guess which platform he might be waiting on, a place he often sought solace in the chaos and anonymity of crowds. As she entered the station, Mara scanned the platforms for a familiar figure, dark hair, denim jacket, that crooked grin that always made her heart skip a beat. And then there he was, standing by the edge of the platform, watching the trains rush by with an air of quiet contemplation. Mara felt her breath catch as she rushed toward him, rain streaming down their faces like tears from heaven. When Danny turned to see her coming, his eyes widened in surprise before softening into a warm smile that always made her feel seen and loved. "Mara," he said, his voice low and husky with emotion. "I thought you changed your mind." "No," she replied, grasping his hand tightly. "I just had to see it for myself. To know what was out there, a perfect life without the messy parts. I don't care about that," Danny whispered fiercely, pulling her close. "The only thing that matters is us, our own imperfect but perfectly suited mess of a life." And as the rain continued to fall all around them, Mara knew she'd made the right choice, the one that would lead them both into the unknown, a life of love and uncertainty, free from the suffocating grip of Solus. She was ready to embrace the messy reality of being alive with Danny, and together they would chart their own course, unpredictable, unoptimized, and utterly, wonderfully real. The rain soaked through Mara's hair as she pulled Danny close, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm sorry I wasn't honest about this sooner. About what Solus said." "I know," he murmured against her temple, his lips brushing her skin. "I should have trusted you more. But it's okay now, really okay? You're not second-guessing yourself." "No," Mara shook her head, the motion sending droplets flying from her hair. "I'm certain. Solus was right. I'd be worse off with Elias. At least with us, we have a chance at something real." "We do." Danny's arms tightened around her. "We always did." He tilted his head, rainwater dripping down his jawline as he studied her face. "So what now? What happens next?" I think we need to go." "Doc." Danny's eyes widened in shock before a slow understanding dawned. "You mean remove your implant?" Mara nodded. The idea had seemed daunting hours ago, but now it felt like the only way forward to be free from Salus's constant monitoring and validation, to truly own their choices without an algorithmic nudge. "We'll be on our own," she continued, her voice gaining strength with conviction. "No more data streams, no more predictions, just us, the messy, imperfect parts of each other." She smiled wryly. "And a surcharge or two." Danny chuckled and pressed his lips to hers in a soft, sweet kiss. "I can live with that," he said when they parted. Hand in hand, they hurried through the rain-soaked streets toward Mara's apartment. Though uncertainty loomed ahead like a dark horizon, she felt a lightness she hadn't known since her audit days before. Solus's perfect answer had disrupted everything. As they reached her door, Mara turned to Danny with a mischievous grin. "You know what this means, right?" "What?" he asked, his brow furrowed in playful confusion. "We can finally get that stupid cat we've been talking about," she replied, her eyes sparkling with humor and excitement. "No more bureau approval required." Danny laughed, the sound echoing through the hallway as they stepped inside. "You're on." And with a kiss, they sealed their decision to live life on their own terms, unoptimized but undeniably real. Hours later, after making their way back out into the rain-soaked city and finally adopting their kitten from a small independent shelter, Mara sat curled up beside Danny on his lumpy couch. The kitten, whom they'd named Luna, slept fitfully in her lap, tiny paws twitching as if chasing dreams. Mara closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the apartment and Danny's body seep into her bones. She could hear the hum of their devices, phones, tablets, a smart speaker in the background, but none were linked to Solus anymore. For the first time in years, she felt truly alone with herself. And yet, despite the solitude, Mara knew Danny was there, his essence infusing every molecule of air around her. Together, they had made a choice to opt out of the system's perfect solution and embrace the unpredictable beauty of their own flawed love story. As she drifted off into sleep, Mara felt a sense of peace wash over her, a knowledge that whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side, as long as Solus allowed them to remain untethered from its all-knowing gaze. But in this moment, nestled against Danny's comforting form and the soft purring of their new kitten, Mara knew she'd trade any statistical guarantee for a life filled with love, laughter, and the thrill of discovery, the messy, imperfect, wonderfully real life that was theirs alone to live.